Okay, it is time to talk about Now let me just get this off my chest, alright? This movie was perfection. You understand me? Perfection. What's my hair doing? I look like a unicorn. I mean, just this movie, dude. This movie. I'm gonna talk about everything. I'm going to talk about everything. Alright, I'm gonna talk about the characters, the castings, the acting, the score, the film direction, the cinematography, the set design, the costume design, the color grading, fucking everything. I'm gonna talk about it. Alright, this movie came out 3 days ago. I've seen this movie 3 times. I went March 3rd because it was available where I live on March 3rd. I went March 3rd by myself, 10:40 at night till 1:40 a.m. to watch it for the first time. I was blown away. The next day, I went with my sister. The day after that, I went with my friends. This movie, dude. I mean, just, you know what I mean? You know what I mean? It just, like, okay. I went into this movie not thinking it was gonna be this good. I knew it was gonna be good. I had faith that it was gonna be good. I was excited for it, but I wasn't overly hyped. I was hyped enough because Batman's one of my favorite characters. I had a lot of faith in Robert Pattinson to be a good Bruce Wayne and a good Batman. I wasn't super excited about Zoe Kravitz or Jeffrey Wright or, Matt Reeves. I was like iffy. I was like, I don't know, but I've never judged something before I go into it. I just watch the movie for what it is and then I make my opinion after. And dude, like this movie, Matt Reeves smashed it. Robert Pattinson smashed it. Jeffrey Wright smashed it. Zoe Kravitz smashed it. You understand me? Every single actor played their characters to perfection. Now let me tell you, if there was a tagline I were to make about this movie, or even something, just a claim that I could make about this movie, is no other comic book movie in history has ever understood the character that they're portraying to the level of the Batman. Let me repeat that for you. There is no other comic book movie. The Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movies, the Andrew Garfield Spider-Man movies, the Tom Holland Spider-Man movies, the Captain America movies, the Superman movies, the other Batman movies, Deadpool movies, Doctor Strange, Black Panther. It doesn't matter who you are talking about. There is not a single other fucking comic book movie that has understood the essence of the character it's trying to portray like the Batman understands both Batman, Catwoman, Gordon, Gotham, everybody. Everybody is the entire movie is just a love letter to the Batman mythos and all the characters that are encompassed with it. That's what this movie is. Now, I say this because I'm trying to make you understand, just genuinely speaking, how insanely good this movie was. I mean, it's on a different level, genuinely speaking. It's on a different level. It was biblical. Now, okay, let's start off with Robert Pattinson as Batman. Now, I have been a Christian Bale Batman enthusiast, you could say, since I was 5 years old, since The Batman Begins came out. The Dark Knight has been arguably my most favorite movie of all time, since I was 8 years old. I've been claiming Christian Bale is the best Batman my entire life, pretty much. And I went into this not expecting the Batman to beat The Dark Knight, and I went into this expecting Robert Pattinson not to beat Christian Bale's performance of both Bruce Wayne and Batman. I have never been so happy to be so wrong. This movie, man, Robert Pattinson is just, if you are a fan of Bruce Wayne and Batman in the comics, there are people who still like Christian Bale's performance the best. There are people who still like Michael Keaton's performance the best. There are still people who think Affleck is the best Batman for whatever fucking reason that is. Now, you can have those opinions. That's okay. You're allowed to think that. But I'm saying, I think for people who are genuine fans of the comic book character of the Batman is probably, I don't know. I'm gonna look at my shelf right now just to see. I think Batman is, I would say the second biggest character of comic collection that I have. I have 4 omnibus of Batman, and I have a gigantic collection of comics. I think Daredevil might be my biggest. I have 5 of his omnibus and a collection of comics, and then I think Cap would be probably third for me. But Batman is up there. I'm a massive fan, and I think if anybody is a fan of comic book Batman, then Robert Pattinson and The Batman will undoubtedly be your favorite. There is just no debate for it. In my eyes, there's no longer a debate. There is no more Christian Bale was the best, Ben Affleck was the best. It's not a debate. Robert Pattinson is Batman. The Batman is Batman. It's perfection. It's no longer up for debate. Because the thing is, this movie was just pitch perfect, line for line comic book Batman. Everything about how he portrayed Bruce Wayne and Batman, especially in his year 1 and year 2 of becoming Batman, perfection. And a lot of people didn't understand this for some reason, but that's exactly who Bruce Wayne is when he first starts out. Bruce Wayne, when he first starts out wanting to be Batman, if you've read Batman Year 1, if you've read even Batman Zero Year, the Snyder Run, if you read the first incarnations, even if you want to go, because there was a huge inspiration of obviously The Long Halloween and Dark Victory, but those aren't the first beginnings of Batman, but still, if you read the beginnings of Batman and you understand him, his initial reasoning for going to Gotham and becoming Batman is not to be a symbol of hope for the innocent people of Gotham. It's not to be the hero for the civilians of Gotham. It is to be Gotham's revenge on the criminal class. It is to be for every unspoken voice that hates the injustice. When he says, "I'm vengeance," he means that shit. In his eyes, he only cares about defeating the criminals, about punishing the people who continue to do horrible shit. Both the corrupt politicians, the corrupt police force, the criminal class, everybody. He has a very black and white view of who is a criminal, why they're a criminal. It's very black and white. It is, you're breaking the law, you're doing morally bad things, you are on the wrong side, and I'm gonna punish you for it. That simple. There is no gray area for him when he starts out. He is enveloped and encompassed by the rage, the despair, the depression, and the wrath he feels from the death of his parents and just the anguish of his life, of living in Gotham without his parents, of having his childhood stripped away from him and watching it happen to other people in Gotham. He is quite literally just the revenge of the city fighting back. That's what he is when he starts out. He doesn't start out as a hero. He is quite literally a vigilante when he first starts out because he doesn't care about helping people. People being helped as a consequence of his actions are not in his mind frame. He's trying to punish the criminals, and that inadvertently helps people, but that's not his point. That's not what he starts out to be. And that's what the Batman portrays perfectly. He's antisocial. He doesn't give a shit about talking to people, regardless of whether or not he's Bruce Wayne or Batman. He doesn't care about keeping up appearances. All he cares about is the mission. Batman is the mission. Every day, every night, criminal class, defeating them, putting them away, beating the shit out of them. That is the mission. That's all he cares about. There is nothing else. There is no life after that. There's no other friends. There is no family. There is no love. There is no need for a Bruce Wayne life. It is nothing but Batman. That is it. And this movie hits that on the fucking head, which is why I say it's just straight up a love letter to the comic book character, because it just adapted precisely what the comics are onto the big screen, which is all any of us want. None of us want to see the characters we love be changed on the big screen. That's something that people need to understand, and by people, I mean the people who make movies. When a person who's read a book or a comic book and they want to see it adapted to the big screen or on television, they do not want to see the story get changed. The producers think that because we already know the story, we're not going to want to watch it because we know what happens. My friend, that's not it at all. We just want to see the book that we've read be adapted on the big screen. We want to see what we envision in our heads and what we look at the page on the big screen, moving and talking with life. That's what we want to see. We don't want to see the story changed, everything the exact same, just on the big screen. That is it. It's very simple. It's very, very simple. I don't get how they keep misunderstanding this. But Matt Reeves didn't misunderstand. He got that shit on the head. He said, "Oh, you want comic book Batman? You want Gordon to feel like Gordon? You want Selena Kyle to feel like Selena Kyle? I got you." That's what Matt Reeves said. And I thank him for it, because that's what he did. Everything about him, the way Robert Pattinson walks and moves and talks, just breathes Batman. When he first enters at the very beginning of the movie, and he is walking around, and all the cops are rightfully so afraid of him. But it's so beautifully done. He doesn't have to have a menacing face. He doesn't have to pretend to be big. Nothing. He just stands straight, says nothing, and just looks around. The slow walking is perfect because Batman is methodical. He shows the detective side in this movie, which is what Batman is. He's the world's greatest detective. You have to show him being a detective. That's the reason he's called the world's greatest detective, man. He is a detective. And he's a damn good one. And so the fact that this movie showed it perfectly with the lenses too, I mean, that's basically detective mode from Arkham. You know what I mean? Recording all of the things so we can go back and watch it. And as well, when he's in the cave and he says it after, when he first comes back, he's like, I force myself to watch the footage every night. Oh, it's perfect. That's what, I don't know if you know this, but that's what Bruce does in his downtime when he's not being Batman on the streets and he's back in the cave. He is literally studying. He studies the maps of He studies the maps of Gotham, all the blueprints, the cities, what's happening around people, new people in the game, different ways to hurt people. He brushes up on his martial arts, on his chemistry, on his knowledge, everything. That's what he does. He studies when he's not out in the streets being Batman. He's Batman everywhere he goes. That's who he is. And this movie got that perfectly. But yeah, the way he talks, slow. He doesn't overstay his welcome. He has nothing to say to these people. He doesn't care about these people. Why would he? The majority of the Gotham City Police Department is corrupt, except for Gordon, which is why he talks to Gordon and works with him. We'll get to that later, but also the relationship between Gordon and Batman is fucking perfect, but we'll get that later. The way he talks, just methodical with purpose. He's not talking for no reason. He's not thinking out loud. He thinks in his head and then says the answer, right? Even when Riddler gets the riddles. Oh, by the way, I felt pretty proud of myself. I guessed all the riddles before Batman did while I watched the movie. Not gonna lie. Nerd! Except for one of them. I didn't get the DA when he's in the car, when he crashes the funeral, the third riddle, because he was asking to divulge the information about the informant. I didn't get that one because why would I get that one? It didn't even sound like an actual riddle. It sounded like a question to that specific person posed as a riddle. But the other ones I got, so I felt pretty proud of myself. The riddles were so good too. Everything was set up there too. And oh man, I'm sorry, I'm all over the place because I want to talk about the Riddler too and how well they did that, but we'll get there. So the way Batman talks, even with the riddles at the very beginning, right? And he says, what does a liar do when he dies or something? And the answer is, of course, he lies still. But we're all sitting there thinking about the answer to the riddle. And like, I feel like Ben Affleck's Batman, Christian Bale's Batman would have talked out loud while they were thinking. But Robert Pattinson just stays silent, as Bruce would. He would stay silent and just think. He would think first and speak later. And so he sits there silent as they're all talking and then says the answer. Perfect. Perfection. Literal perfection. The opening sequence as well, I don't think there's ever been a better opening sequence to a comic book movie ever. It establishes the tone, the feel of the movie, the character perfectly. And I mean, dude, the fact that all the criminals are scared of the shadows because they don't know which shadow he's in, and just Bruce saying they think I hide in the shadows, but I am the shadows, that could have been ripped straight from a comic panel. Word for word, line for line, could have been straight up ripped out of a comic. That is exactly what Bruce would say. And he has said many things just like it in the comics. It's perfect. Perfect. This Robert Pattinson's fighting ability is also fantastic, but I love it too because it gives so much room for growth. You can see this Batman is one of pure willpower and determination, pure brute strength and force, and he doesn't have all of the training Batman has yet, but I mean, he's got time. You know what I mean? He's got time to get there, but he's still, like, the fact that he doesn't have as much training, he clearly has a certain amount of training in different techniques. I think from what I could tell, I would see maybe some Muay Thai, some Krav Maga, some boxing, and probably some Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Obviously we know Batman knows every martial art, so obviously there's a lot more than that he needs to get under his belt. But I think for a starting year one Batman, it's pretty damn perfect, because this isn't the Batman that went to go, you know, for a decade leave Gotham and go train around the world with the League of Shadows and other monks, ninjas, everything from other places. This isn't that one. You know, Alfred trained him and he trained himself. We'll get to Alfred too. Alfred in this movie is very much inspired by Earth 1 Batman, but again, we'll get to that later. But gave so much room for improvement. But I was just saying, the fact that this version of Batman doesn't know all of the different fighting styles, but is still such a force to be reckoned with, is just perfect, because it is truly who he starts out as. He is fighting from pure rage. That's what he's fighting out of, just pure anger and despair. He revels in it. That's why Batman originally needs Robin, because Dick is this like shining light of just happiness, of upbeat. He gives Batman purpose again. He makes Batman happy. Batman's usually just constantly in despair and sadness and dark, and then Dick Grayson comes into the picture and he's this shining ball of joy which lightens Bruce up, obviously. I don't know if we'll ever get a Robin in this movie. I don't know if I could fully see it. I don't know if we'll ever be able to do Robin actually well, but I guess we'll find out later. I think this Batman's voice was perfect. It's not as like, the Christian Bale Batman voice doesn't actually bother me. It bothers a lot of people. I'm not one of them. It doesn't bother me very much at all. I understand it's a little bit extra, but I always thought it was kind of cool. But it definitely is quite a lot. I was never a fan of the Ben Affleck one because you lose so much emotion when the voice is automated. But that's the thing I love about Robert Pattinson's one, is it's just deep enough and growly enough to feel intimidating, but not overbearing like Christian Bale's. And it's different from his Bruce Wayne voice too, you can tell, which is good. But I like it that it's still his actual voice, because we can get to feel his emotion from him, which is fantastic. Other Bruce Wayne plot points and Batman plot points that I think people raised up and I think are incredibly stupid. I don't know how blind you have to be. Like, I don't know if we watched the same movie, if this is a criticism you hold, but let's get into it. So first of all, Bruce spying on Selena. Someone thought this was like played as creepy. It isn't though, because Bruce isn't spying on Selena to be creepy. He's spying on Selena because he suspects her of being involved. So he follows to where she lives so he can follow her movements. And then obviously he followed her and found Annika, obviously. And like, he wasn't looking through it and like fucking jerking off while he was you know what I mean? He was looking through the binoculars to follow her movements. He didn't care that she was changing. He doesn't give a fuck. And that's the other thing. This Batman is a recluse. He's socially weird. He doesn't give a shit about social cues. He doesn't care about talking to people. He's lost all of his human interaction. He's lost all of his human involvement. He has no need, no want. He does not care about talking to people. So these social cues that you and I might understand just aren't there for him. So he's not doing that to be creepy. He's following a case. He is scoping out a suspect that he believes to be involved in this case, and he doesn't know what role she plays yet. So he follows her. It's very simple. It has nothing to do with being creepy or perverted. And on top of that, it plays as a beautiful parallel between Riddler and Batman. At the very beginning of the movie, Riddler is looking through the binoculars, and I personally thought when I was watching it, I thought we were going to see the death of the Waynes again. I thought that was Bruce playing on Halloween, and that was his dad coming in, and then we found out that was the mayor, and Riddler was standing in the background with the most horrifyingly beautiful entrance, by the way. But it was supposed to be a parallel to that, of the Riddler spying on this family with binoculars from across the street, and then Bruce doing the same thing. It's a parallel between the hero and the villain. I don't understand how you missed that, but regardless. So that's that point dealt with. Another point I heard is this Batman doesn't show any emotion. Did we watch the same movie? Did we watch the same movie? Did you watch the movie I watched? First of all, from like off the bat, I mean, in the first case we see him in, and he's staring at the kid, you can literally see the tear well up in his eye while he stares at that kid. He doesn't need to say a single word. Robert Pattinson's eyes portray every feeling you could ever need. You could feel the empathy, the sympathy, and the sorrow he feels just staring at that kid, and all he can see is a reflection of himself and every other kid in Gotham who might have to deal with this one day, which is why he eventually becomes the hero we know him to be. You can feel every bit of that. I don't understand how you could say he has no emotion. Even in the first fucking 10 minutes of the movie, they prove you wrong. But anyway. And then another scene where he's showing an unbelievable amount of it is his entire heart-to-heart with Alfred. God, that was beautiful. Because you have to remember, I mean, Bruce literally explains it to you. Word for word, he explains it to you. When he's talking to Alfred, and he's saying, I thought I'd mastered all of that. My emotions, my feelings, the despair, anything. He said, I thought I'd mastered it. And then he says, of course, you know, I hadn't mastered the fear of having to go through it all again, of losing somebody that I love. As a man who is so incredibly guarded, I don't, like, you could see it in Pattinson's performance. It takes so much strength out of Bruce to even say those words to Alfred. He couldn't even look at Alfred while he said them. That's how much it took out of him to even say that. So he's not gonna break down crying and be a sob fest, but that's the level of emotion he's portraying in that moment. That's who Bruce Wayne is. He's not gonna sit there and cry on your bedside, but him just saying that should tell you everything you need to know. I felt so much emotion from Pattinson, so I really don't understand how that's a criticism. I think you're just not watching the movie if that's genuinely what you think. Or you just aren't happy that this is how this character is written. But that's literally who Batman is. Batman's not going to sit there and sob at your bedside. He's going to say stuff and keep his composure, because that's what he's built himself up to be. And that's what he's shown out through it. That's why he is so guarded with Selena too. And even Alfred, like he said, he doesn't want to lose somebody he cares about. He can't bear to go through that again, so he refuses to care about anyone. He refuses to become friends with anybody because he's terrified of losing them again. That's Batman to a T. And Pattinson portrays that beautifully, so I don't understand where this idea of him being emotionless comes from. But I digress. Jeffrey Wright as Jim Gordon. Oh, you know what I'm saying, bro? Like, again, The Dark Knight comes in a picture. I thought Gary Oldman was fucking phenomenal. And then Jeffrey Wright comes here and just fucking kicks it out of the water. You know what I mean? He was pitch perfect. This Gordon felt so much like Gordon, of the entirety of the GCPD being dog shit. Everybody hating on Gordon for even working with Batman, and nobody wanting to do the right thing, and Jim just sitting there as one of the few good people left in Gotham who's not afraid to stand up. That's the reason he loves to work with Batman, because he sees this person who refuses to let Gotham corrupt him and refuses to let the shitty things that happen in Gotham continue to happen. Why wouldn't he work with Batman? Him and Batman are tight. Like in the Dark Knight trilogy, Batman and Gordon, they're not buddy-buddies per se. They're partners, but they're not buddy-buddies. But in the comics, Bruce and Jim Gordon are kind of buddy-buddies. They know each other's families, they joke together, not Bruce obviously, but like they have this level of witty banter with each other. They talk a lot, and they both work the case. In The Dark Knight, it felt like Batman did most of the work and then told Jim Gordon what to do. But in this, it was 50-50. They were on it together, they were partners, they talked. You know what I mean? This is exactly how Bruce and Jim Gordon work together, man. And this movie just continues to actually understand who they're portraying, man. It really gets the essence of these characters. And I'll be completely honest, I don't care about race bending in most things like this. I think if the actor can play the character correctly, I'm happy. But obviously, as like most people, we don't like change. We've grown attached to these characters. Like Lucius Fox is always my example. Lucius Fox in the comics is a black character. He is a black man. Now, he is not the same as Black Panther, right? His black skin color really doesn't do much for the story. He is a side character in the Batman mythos. He's a fantastic character, and I'm a very big fan of him, but he is black in the comics. I do not want you to change his race. I don't. Now, they might do it, and then the actor might do a great job as Lucius, and I'll be like, okay. But again, I don't want you to change it because he's written a certain way in the comics. These characters came before you. They came before you did. So don't put your own flair on it. You didn't make these characters, you're adapting them. So adapt who they are, what they look like, and who they are. He's black in the comics, please keep him that way. I don't want to see a white Lucius Fox. Him being black has nothing to do with the story, but that's the way he's drawn, so you should keep it that way. That's how I feel. But again, I'm not a huge person against it either. Like I said, if they can portray the character well, by all means, I'm okay with it, man. I'm okay with it, because the true thing about the character isn't what they look like, it's how they act. Is the character who they say they are? If he's portraying Jim Gordon, does that feel like Jim Gordon? If it is, then I don't care, man. It's that simple. It's that simple. So again, I'm under the impression of it doesn't really matter about the race bending part. I just don't like change, as most of us don't like change. But so when I first heard about Jeffrey Wright and Zoe Kravitz being Catwoman and Jeffrey Wright and Jim Gordon, Jeffrey Wright I had no really opinion on. I was like, I don't know how that's gonna go. He kind of looks the part, I'm cool with it. Zoe Kravitz, I was like, she might do a bang up job, and she fucking did. But the point being that, Jim Gordon being black didn't bother me one bit because he was so fucking good. He was a perfect Jim Gordon. So I really don't care that he was race bent. It doesn't make any difference to the story. Him being black does nothing. He's in the comics as he's white in the comics, it's okay. He was phenomenal in this movie, and there is no reason to chastise him simply because the character is white in the comics. I think that's incredibly stupid. I think he did a fucking phenomenal job, and he should be praised for it. Point blank period, that's the end of discussion. So all in all, Jeffrey Wright as Jim Gordon was perfection, along with Robert Pattinson as Batman. Selena Kyle. Zoe Kravitz. beautiful. You know what I'm saying? I mean, again, this Catwoman was so perfect, man, because like we all know, Catwoman is kind of she tiptoes the line of being a villain, of doing bad things, but also being good a lot of the time too. Because at the basis of it, Selena has a good heart. She was brought up in some horrible conditions, and she's been hardened by the streets of Gotham. So she doesn't care about anybody, except her friends and herself and her people. But she's got a good heart, and she just does some questionable things. But in this movie, perfect explanation of who she is and why she is the way she is. When we first see her going into the house to steal, she wasn't even stealing money. She was stealing her friend's passport back, which was stolen from her. Nothing wrong in my eyes. Good. No issues. No issues at all. Her working at the club for Penguin, having the quote-unquote relationship with Falcone before we really understand that she's his daughter, of course. But her working there, and then Bruce finds out later that she was just working there to get an in so she could get the money to leave the country for Annika and herself. Beautiful. Stealing from this drug lord piece of shit? Go ahead. That don't bother me. Go ahead. You know what I mean? Like, perfect. She's doing, let's say, morally wrong things like stealing from others, but she's doing it for some pretty empathetic reasons. She's trying to get out of the country and save her friend who she cares about. And that's one of the best things this movie does, is change Bruce's black and white perspective on criminals. That's what Selena does to him. Selena shows Bruce that criminals can be gray, morally gray. They can do bad things, but it doesn't make them bad people. You know, and I think it perfectly shows, like, at the beginning of the movie when Bruce is fighting those guys who, for whatever reason, for some fucked up reason, enjoy punching random people in the face and recording it. That shit pissed me off. So watching them get their asses handed to them was very nice. But the thing I liked was that one kid that was scared to fight back, and he actually hit the gun out of the guy's way when he was trying to shoot Bruce. That kid had some goodness in him. Now, this Batman isn't the hopeful hero Batman yet, but in my eyes, let's say 10 years down the line, if that same thing happened, I fully believe Bruce would have said something to him like, you clearly don't have your heart in this. You're not the same as these other guys. Get your head on straight. Don't be like these morons. You're clearly a good kid. Stick to your shit. Don't fall prey to these other idiots just to fit in. Like, that's what I feel like Bruce would have said to him. He would have said something like that to try and help him on the right path. Hell, he probably would have actually helped him. Like, set him up at a school, get him a job, anything. Bruce would have genuinely done that, I feel like. We're not at that stage for this Batman yet, but that's what I felt like. And I think that's where Selena does such a good job of helping broaden his perspective of just this, you're a criminal, you should have known better, you shouldn't be doing that. And the perfect conversation for it is her and him on the rooftop with that beautiful orange sunset in the background when we find out that Selena Kyle is the daughter of Falcone, which is also, for anybody who didn't see it coming, is ripped directly out of the comic, so don't even worry about that. But the fact that we hear Selena and her reasoning, right? She talks about her mom, about being basically raised in the club because she worked there, and then her mom being strangled to death when she was 7, and basically having to be raised up by herself, homeless on the streets. Falcone didn't give a shit. This is what the environment she was raised in. You know what I mean? And she's stealing from these horrible people to try and help her friends and herself to a better life. I mean, Bruce is like when she says it, my favorite line too, when she says, I don't know who you are under that mask, but clearly you grew up rich. And I was like, oh, beautiful. She gets it. They get it. Because the thing is, you have to remember, Bruce is incredibly privileged. Of course he's a billionaire. And things like that, which shows perfectly in Riddler's carpet tool. When the cop knew, he's like, you know, it's a tucker. It's to tuck in for carpeting and stuff. Bruce didn't know that, because why would he? He's a billionaire, and his father was a billionaire. If someone had to do carpeting in their house, they hired somebody. They didn't do it themselves. They weren't blue collar workers. So why would he know that that's a carpeting tool? But the regular GCPD officer, he knew it was a carpeting tool. Because he was middle class. His dad was blue collar worker. He knew it. And this is where it shows where Bruce's privilege of being a billionaire hinders his detective ability, because he doesn't have that experience. As he grows up and as his Batman experience continues to rise and deepen, he starts to obviously understand that and how to look at things differently from other people's perspectives. But it just showed it so well of how he grew up as a rich boy. and how that affects his ability to be a detective, how that affects his outlook on life. It affected how he viewed Selena, how he viewed Annika. When Annika was getting into it with Falcone and stuff, and he was like, she should have known better. Maybe you should have explained it to her. And Selena was like, what the fuck are you talking about? And then Bruce even says to her, he's like, how do you feel about selling your integrity for money? And that's when Selena's like, clearly you grew up rich. You don't know what it's like to struggle to try and meet the month's rent and failing and having to live under the stress of possibly being evicted every single month, about being terrified about not having a place to live. You have no idea what that feels like. And it shows. And that's what broadens Bruce's perspective. That's what helps him become a better Batman. It's what helps him become the hero Batman instead of this rageful vigilante Batman. That's what helps him actually want to help people and save people and inspire people. It's because he understands that all of a sudden everybody's life sucks. You think Bruce is the only one to have a shitty life? Oh, my parents died, boo-hoo? That's what Riddler was saying, and he had a point. He was like, you know how many other kids in Gotham's parents die? None of them are billionaires. Yeah, sure, your parents died too, and that fucking sucks, but I'd rather cry into a $100 bill than into a napkin, you know what I mean? Like, being rich helps, man. You got to go home into a mansion with a loving butler to take care of you. Like Riddler said, it was 30 kids to a room. They didn't have anybody to go home and cry to. They had no nice place to do. They didn't have the best schools. They couldn't do whatever they felt like because money wasn't an option. Those are real criticisms of Bruce as a person. And he has to learn that, and he learns it throughout this movie, which again is why this movie is fucking beautiful. So yeah, all in all, Selena, 10 out of 10. Riddler. I loved this Riddler. I think he was fantastic. I think it was a beautiful interpretation of his comic, because the thing is, comic Riddler is goofy as a motherfucker. He's a great villain, and he's incredibly intelligent. He's Batman's intellectual equal, if not superior at times, for certain moments until Batman shows him what the fuck is up. But he's kind of goofy. You know, wherein the way he dresses, the way he talks, he's very eccentric in the comics. So they kind of kept that part in the movie. But I loved this just deranged, unhinged serial killer. Whenever I saw him on screen, I felt nothing but Seven. That's all I felt. And when they got into his apartment, the ledgers, the way everything was set out, the way it was filmed, the music, Seven. That's all it was Seven. That's all I felt throughout it. And that is fantastic, because Seven is fucking amazing. And so I love that that's the route they went with this. They didn't make him necessarily cringy. There were times, sure, but like I said, it made sense in terms of the character. It's another criticism I've heard where they were like, I've heard some people say his performance was meh, and I was like, that's just incorrect. It's just straight up incorrect. And they were like, him being too eccentric and too goofy, and like, fair, I agree with that. I think he was a little bit too eccentric, but the thing is, it makes sense for his character. The only time acting is bad or it's cringy is when it's unintentional. If he didn't intentionally mean to do it that way, it's bad and cringy. But it was intentional. He was playing the character that specific way. This Riddler was fucking live streaming to his 500 cretins on the dark web. Thank you guys for being here. Thank you for all the helpful tips on what guns to choose and masks to wear and bullet calibers to use. My next victim's gonna be nice. This has been a great journey for, like, what? Of course this guy's gonna be fucking weird and eccentric. Why wouldn't he be? He's live streaming to 500 kids on the dark web. What do you expect? What do you expect? It's straight up accurate. And then at the end too, when he's singing Ave Maria with Bruce there, when he's like, what have you done? That entire scene, it makes sense. Him like screaming when Bruce foils his plan, basically, when it doesn't go how he thinks it's gonna go. You know, Bruce is calling him, he's like, you're just a murderous psychopath is what you are. You're crazy. We are nothing alike. And Riddler's just screaming there, and he's like, this is not how this was supposed to go. Is exactly how that character would act, because this character clearly, you know, didn't interact with anybody socially. Clearly nobody cared about him. He had no friends. He was the social outcast, so he grew up weird. Of course he did. Why wouldn't he? It makes sense. So the way he acts, and like everything, like you said, he likes puzzles. He likes planning things. So when things don't go according to plan in his eyes, why wouldn't he throw a temper tantrum? He's still a kid in his mind. He hasn't fully matured. He's mentally handicapped in some form. Not handicapped in terms of literally handicapped, but you know what I mean. My dude's got some mentally deranged perspectives, ideas, mental illness. But I think the Riddler was really, really well done. I loved him. I thought his performance was awesome. I thought he was unnerving. Every time he was on screen, I was genuinely creeped out, and I was held in suspense. I was holding my breath. His introduction, man, don't get me started. His introduction was perfect. The horrifying breathing in the binoculars, and then when we get inside and we finally realize it's not Thomas Wayne, and then the Riddler is just standing there in the back, illuminated by the flashing lights. I mean, come on, man. And he just stands there. He does nothing. All he does is stand there, and I was terrified. Beautiful villain. Absolutely beautiful. 10 out of 10. Fantastic. I think Gotham City was so well done as a character, as an adaptation of what Gotham really is like. Because there's always that saying, people say, why doesn't Bruce... It's always the stupidest take on Twitter. Why doesn't Bruce just fund the city, mental health hospitals, donate charity, yada fucking blah blah. This movie tackled it perfectly, where his father literally made $1 billion fund for renewable as the renewal campaign, the renewal fund, and it literally got corrupted. It was an entire fund of $1 billion to try and help people for charity, literally got corrupted and was just used to funnel more money for other rich people. Perfectly showcased why Bruce can't just simply make the city better as Bruce Wayne with money wise, because that's the thing about Gotham. I feel like people don't understand it. Gotham is the most corrupt place possible. The most. Every single level of infrastructure of the entire city is fucked. Somebody owns somebody. Always. There's very little people in Gotham that are scot-free, that can continue to live day to day without being dirty, without being bad. And the majority of them either do it for money, do it for greed. Sometimes they're threatened, like Falcone did to Thomas Wayne, right? He got something over Thomas Wayne, and then Thomas Wayne had to bend the knee basically to Falcone. And then, Thomas did the thing that most people won't do. He stood up to Falcone, and then he got killed for it, which is why people don't stand up to them. But that's the whole point, is that Gotham feels like Gotham. It's dark. It's raining constantly throughout the movie, which is perfect because that's exactly what Gotham feels like all the time. Gotham is never happy. Gotham is not Metropolis. It's not a sunny, bright day in Gotham almost ever. It is constantly shitty. It sucks all the time. That's what Gotham is. It's a reflection of the character that the story is about. Metropolis is bright and happy and sunny because Superman is from Metropolis. He lives in Metropolis. That's his place. That's why the city reflects the hero. Gotham reflects Batman, and Batman is dark and brooding and sad and rageful and gritty. That's why Gotham reflects who he is. It was perfect, both with how the characters interact, how it feels, the atmosphere of Gotham, the citizens and how they act, how the criminals act. Everything about Gotham was perfect. It was dark. It was intense. It was living, it was breathing. This is the most Gotham has ever looked. Like in the Dark Knight trilogy, like in Dark Knight Rises, Gotham didn't look like Gotham. Gotham looked like fucking Chicago. You know what I mean? Like, it didn't look like Gotham. It didn't feel like Gotham. Like, Gotham's a place where it can't feel like just another city in America or another city in Canada. Like, what I mean in terms of filming. Like, you don't want to be able to look at it and be like, I can tell that they're just filming in Vancouver, or I can tell they're just filming in New York. Like, you don't want to feel that when you're watching it. You want it to feel like the living, breathing city that it is. And in this movie, it was just exactly what it set out to be. It was a living, breathing character that added to the atmosphere of the movie and the story. Did it perfectly. 10 out of 10. The music. Okay, man, like, listen, the score, like, when I first heard the score in the trailer, I was not that excited. I didn't like it. I'll be honest with you. In the trailer for this movie, I did not like the Batman theme. And then I heard it on YouTube, and I did not like what I heard. I was like, this fucking... I'm not a fan of it. I'm not at all. Then I heard it in the movie. And every time it came on, I lost my shit. And I have been listening to it on repeat for the past 3 days straight. It is so good. When I heard it in the movie, man, it just... Every time I heard those beautiful, loud, triumphant horns just blaring in my ears. Every time, throughout the entire movie, anytime it came on the screen, genuinely inside, I was like, fucking Batman's coming. Batman's coming. You know what I mean? Like, that's what I felt on the inside when I heard that score every time it came on the screen. When he was getting ready for the Batmobile scene, or right at the beginning when he's beating up the henchmen, at the end, like, anytime that score hit the screen, I was like, I got chills. I was ready. I wanted to fight. I was like, fucking Batman is coming. You guys are screwed. Y'all don't know who you messed with. You know what I mean? Like, that's how I felt every time I heard it. And then after the movie, I've genuinely been listening to the entire score on repeat. The entire album I've added to my instrumental playlist. I've listened to it over and over and over and over and over again for the past 3 days straight. It's phenomenal. It is so goddamn good. Specific ones that I think are really tremendous are obviously the main Batman theme. I think Catwoman's theme is fantastic. I think the Riddler's is really good. I think Sonata in Darkness is fantastic. The Batman's True Calling, or the Bat's True Calling, another fantastic one. And then the Bat in the Rafters, so good. I mean, there's just so many tracks which are beautiful, and they just, all of the scores just encapsulate their characters beautifully. Like Selena's, just the fluttery piano is so good. And then when Bruce and Selena are together and both of their scores kind of mix over, oh, it's gorgeous. You feel Batman's theme, and then you hear the soft fluttery as if she's tiptoeing on the score, right? She's just tiptoeing into the scene. The beautiful essence of Catwoman just punctuated perfectly in the score. 10 out of 10. Dude, the cinematography, man. This movie, like, I remember, like, genuinely, because I love the MCU. I'm a massive comic book nerd. That's what I am. I love the MCU, I love Marvel, I love DC. I'm a lover of all. There is no DC or Marvel for me. They are both the same thing. They are comics, and I love both. That is it. There is no Marvel over DC or DC over Marvel. They're the same thing to me. I value them as both the same. In terms of movies, they're not even close. But I remember when I first got in to the movie theater and I was watching the movie, literally all first 5 minutes of the movie, man, just the intro. I remember sitting there and I was just like, it feels so damn good to watch a superhero movie that looks like a fucking movie. Do you know what I mean when I say that? I don't just mean the coloring of how MCU movies look. I don't just mean the atmosphere of the MCU movies. I don't mean the cringy joke telling of the MCU movies. I mean the fact that even the MCU movies filming on digital cameras compared to actual film, you can feel it when you watch a movie. You can see the difference in how the movie is shot, what cameras they're using, what they choose to do, how they use green screens, how they use LED screens, how they use special effects and CGI and practicality. How they use it sets up everything in how the movie is shot and how the movie is framed. And the first 5 minutes, man, the lighting, the shot choice selection, and the editing of them, the way they were framed, I mean, it was just perfect. And I was like, I can't tell you how good it feels to finally watch a superhero movie that feels like a movie. That's what we feel like when we watch The Dark Knight. That's why we hold The Dark Knight, one of the reasons why we hold The Dark Knight in such a high praise, because you watch it, it feels like a movie, right? You're not on some theme park joyride. It's a movie, man. And that's not aimed at the MCU. That's aimed at other movies too. I just mean, like, in terms of quality, like when you watch Seven, right? When you watch The Wolf of Wall Street, Django Unchained, Inception, when you watch these movies, you're like, you really feel like you're in for an experience that is undescribable. It's just, you have to live it. It's so good. And the first 5 minutes is all it took. And I just sat there genuinely just feeling so satisfied that I was able to watch this movie at the time I was. And I was so content is what I was. I was filled with nothing but satisfaction of staring at the screen and seeing a beautiful shot selection, gorgeous cinematography with beautiful lighting, and the colors looking gorgeous and vibrant and dark. Like, there's a difference with that too, because Gotham is shown being incredibly dark, but you have no issues with lighting in the movie. There's no issues with lighting. Nothing is unseeable. You can see everything. Everything is illuminated correctly. Lighting plays a big part in the movie in terms of portraying atmosphere, even portraying feelings when it's on a character's face or when a character is encompassed by a shadow or partially. Lighting plays a big role. And I think the fact that Gotham is so dark and everything is so dark, and you never really, it doesn't hinder your experience in terms of visually speaking, just speaks volumes to how well made this film is. So, cinematography, 10 out of 10. And man, I mean, just the ending. The ending is so good. Batman's arc in this is fantastic. He starts off as vengeance, and by the end, he finally understands that he has to become more. He can't just be Gotham's vengeance. He can't be Gotham's revenge. He can't be Gotham's anger and hatred towards injustice. He has to inspire hope. He finally gets it at the end, and I love the way they show it. when he says it, and the Riddler henchman, and Gordon asks him, "What's your name?" And he goes, "I'm Vengeance." And Bruce just looks at him with this look of pure disgust. But at the end, he finally gets it too, because the thing is, from the Riddler's henchman's perspective, he's telling the truth. In his eyes, he believes that he is Vengeance. He is getting revenge on the elite class of Gotham for all of their corruption and perversion and all the shit they do, and they don't care about the working class or the poor people of their city. They don't give a shit. The rich get richer, and in their eyes, they are Vengeance. He's being honest when he says that. And that's when it dawns on Bruce that he's like, I have to be more than just Vengeance. Because the Riddler was inspired by Batman in this movie. He tells us that. He goes, "You inspired me. You showed me what I can do." And Batman inadvertently inspired the other Riddler henchmen as well. And that's when Bruce gets it. He's like, I can't just be revenge. I have to instill fear. I have to be fear to the criminals, but I also have to be hope to the people of Gotham. Because if I'm just Vengeance, I'm no better than them at this point. They can see what I'm doing and take inspiration from that, and that's not something I want. That's what Bruce is thinking. And the fact that he gets that by the end is just so perfect, and genuinely speaking, literally the Batman story. It's exactly how he starts and exactly what he realizes. It's why he starts as a vigilante and becomes a hero. It's just perfect. And another part in the ending that I loved, it, like, I remember when I saw it too, I was like, that's so Batman. When everything is hitting the fan, right? When all the waves hit into the stadium, where their last resort place, and the waves break in and everything is going crazy and they're just staring at it, and then the electric box cuts off and the electricity is going in the water and it's gonna get electrocuted and they're staring at it. Bruce doesn't hesitate for a second. Without thinking, grapple gun immediately cuts the wire off. He gets electrocuted when he cuts it, but doesn't matter. That's Batman right there. That is Batman to a T. No hesitation, jumps right away to save the people. You know what I'm saying? Done and dusted. That's it right there. That's what it is. That is what it is. And I just loved watching that, because I was like, this is at the ending, he's getting it. You know, he's understanding that he has to help people too. And that whole final sequence is just beautiful, man. Just beautiful. Him getting into the water with the flare, the red lighting. Oh my God. The red and blue lighting on the water, the red lighting from the flare, and then him helping the people get out and then following him to safety, and him carrying the young girl and laying her down for the paramedics, and she's holding on to him, and he holds there. He's like, he understands that he's giving these people hope. He's being their role model in their time of need, in a place that is so filled with shit and darkness and sadness. He can instill the people with hope. And the final lines of, we all have scars, and even after they physically healed, they can still mentally torment us, but if we allow ourselves to heal from them, they can make us stronger and give us the ability to endure. My God, so beautifully said, because that's the whole theme of Batman. The scar that he's talking about is him losing his parents, and he has learned to allow that to mold himself into this being, into this person that is just unbreakable, uncorruptible. I mean, like, genuinely in my head when I was watching that entire scene, I was like, the scene that comes in my head was when all the water is going and everyone's losing their shit. I can visually in my mind see that this Batman, like, walking down the street in the water alone, going to save people and help people. Like, that's the whole reason Jim Gordon loves Batman, because he's the one man that just, it does not matter what anybody says, it does not matter what you think, it doesn't matter how dire the situation is. If he has to walk into no man's land by himself every time, he will do it, no questions asked. That's why he's such a symbol of hope for the people of Gotham. It's one of my favorite, actually, comic moments. I can't remember what comic I read it in, but I remember when I read it, it's one of my favorite Batman moments. There was a young girl, she's about 16, and she's walking in Gotham late at night, and these two men corner her into an alley, and one of them's like, you know, we're gonna have some fun with you. So clearly they were gonna try and rape her and maybe kill her, which is horrific. And this young girl was not scared one bit, and you can see in her thought bubbles, and she's like, you know, she's like, in my head, she's like, I know he's coming. Because she knows that Batman has her back. And then I think in like the next panel, you see Batman emerge from the shadows and the two dudes run off. And, you know, like then she looks and she sees him and whatnot. But it's like that right there is what it is. That's what Batman stands for right there. He stands for people should be allowed to walk through Gotham at night and feel safe, a sense of security, because they know this unstoppable force has their back. They shouldn't be afraid of Batman. If you're one of the good people in Gotham, you will never be afraid of Batman. If Batman is done correctly, never once will you ever be afraid. You have no reason to be afraid of him, because he would never hurt you. He would only ever save you. He'd only be there to protect you. And that scene was just exactly what I feel Robert Pattinson's Batman is going to become, and already kind of is. Like, that's what I feel at the end there. Like, when he saved that guy at the very beginning of the movie, the Asian man who was gonna get punched in the face by those ass wipes, and he says to Batman, he's like, you know, please don't hurt me, and Batman just stares at him, right? Because he's kind of a myth at this point. People don't fully know if he's real, what he's doing. People are terrified of him. Nobody knows if he's truly on the good side or on the bad side. He is straight up just a vigilante. People are scared, and so even that guy's like, please don't hurt me. But by the end of it, after he's helped all those people, when that girl is holding on to him and he holds her hand all the way until she's out of reach, right at the end, everyone's starting to understand that you don't have to be afraid of him. He's there to help you. That's who he is now. He is no longer just the vengeful, rageful despair of Gotham. He is now its hope. He's its shining bright light. That's the arc of this movie, and that is as Batman as it gets. That's the tagline for this movie, bro. As Batman as it gets. What else am I supposed to say? That's all that needs to be said. This movie was perfection. Couldn't get better if it tried. 10 out of 10 on every category. Phenomenal. Tell me what you thought in the comments below. Leave a like if you enjoyed. And I'll catch you guys next time. Peace. Hey guys, thank you all for watching that recent video, and I just want to give a special shout out to Oko Kanutilla. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I'm really sorry if I'm not, but just want to give a special shout out to you. You've been subscribed to my tier 1 on Patreon for a while now, and I appreciate you so much. Thank you so much for the support. Love you guys.